So interestingly, we have about 20 minutes for this conversation, and you all will agree with me that this conversation, we can have it for the whole day because it borders on improving the state of our ecosystem in Nigeria as a country. But I would start with the question of what does a thriving and resilient ecosystem mean to you? What has to happen? What needs to be going on for you to say, yes, this ecosystem in Nigeria is thriving and resilient? Let me start with Damilola.
Thank you very much, Hakeem. Thanks for having me. I think for me, first of all, just to say that we're doing good as the Nigerian ecosystem. I've been to a number of other ecosystems that keep asking, how are you guys in Nigeria doing it? And I keep saying like we're resilient people, normally. But for me, in terms of like what does a thriving ecosystem look like, is that great infrastructures are in place for startups to thrive. Talent is there that they can hire. Quality talent, and in terms of quantity as well. So you have a lot of quality talent. You have local investment, just as you have foreign investment, but there's a lot of local investment. There's a lot of local capacity as well. You have government support, also very important. We already have the entrepreneurs that, the hustling spirit is there. But some of these, critical factors are also important. And that you have an ecosystem that gives back, so that you have pipeline, you have people that go from pre-seed, to Series A, Series B, or they exit, and then they also invest in others. And it always gladdens my heart when I see that, because those are sort of like elements of an ecosystem that is thriving and will continue to thrive as well.
Oh, thank you very much. I think I like the fact that you mentioned resilience. The typical Nigerian slang of, no matter what happens, I'm all right. We'll keep going. It's our spirit, especially in Lagos. So I go to Folarin. What does it mean to you for an ecosystem to be thriving?
Sure, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think the way I think of this is I tie this to the 4 challenges that startups face based on our research. The first being access to funding, second being access to additional markets, third being favorable policy in terms of infrastructure and policy, general policy, and the fourth being talent, as Dami has said. So for the funding part, yes, it's easy flow. Thriving looks like easy flow of foreign investment and also thriving local investment into startups. But what that also looks like is what a mature ecosystem also looks like is founders investing in startups, founders investing in founders. So it means exits and then these founders going on to invest in other startups like themselves, like they were a couple of years before they exited. Second thing is the markets. It's saying that, okay, they can scale beyond. Lagos is a microcosm of Nigeria, So they can scale beyond the community, then their states to different states, and then across borders to West Africa, then Africa, and then globally, for example. The third being policy and infrastructure. I like to use this line now. Let the poor breathe. Let the startups breathe. Don't suffocate them, right? So favorable policy. So either support them with your policy or you don't you don't suffer them essentially, right? And what that infrastructure also looks like is enabling digital access through, I guess, deeper internet penetration or smartphone penetration. And the last thing being talent, right? We have ecosystem enablers that are attempting to do one or two things through the accelerators and incubators and investments, but we cannot do everything. So what that also looks like is other people playing other parts of that value chain in terms of, okay, training developers, empowering developers, right? Then accelerating startups, scaling SMEs, enabling startups to scale up, but also then creating a bridge between developers and startups and even more. These are some of the examples. And I can then tie it to, sorry to go this longer, but I want to tie this all back to a Google where I work, is that why we do what we do now is we say a rising tide lifts all boats. And what that essentially means is that the success of a Nigerian ecosystem is the success of all of us. So if startups are thriving, for example, then it means they will come back inevitably and use our products and all of that.
So if I get you right, you need the ecosystem to thrive at Google so they could come back and then Google can keep thriving. Okay, so it's a mutually beneficial relationship. We must blow so that you two can blow. Okay. Chisom, what do you think?
So I definitely agree with Damilola, everything that Damilola has said about the need to build out a strong talent pipeline. That's very important, and not just at the early stage. For mid and senior level professionals, it's important that we build out that pipeline as well. But more importantly, we need the ecosystem to be inclusive. And consciously or unconsciously, when we design our programs, we're always thinking Lagos. And I know that this is Lagos Startup Week, but we're talking about building out the Nigerian tech ecosystem. And we should start to focus on emerging markets. There are a lot of innovators in emerging tech centers like Aba, like some places in Akwa Ibom State that are doing amazing work, but don't have these opportunities. So one of the ways that we can build out that we can support the ecosystem and we can make it more resilient is by democratizing these opportunities, so that startups don't need to come all the way to Lagos to access opportunities. And secondly, we need to also fund and support startups that are building products that capture new markets. So this is an FMCG example, but I don't know, for most of us, years back, if you could not afford milk, you just couldn't. Until Cowbell started the sachetization process and created a whole new market that other businesses began to tap into. And it's not just with FMCG, there's also with clean tech. Initially, it just seemed very abstract. You needed to have millions of naira to have access to affordable or alternative energy. But now there are business models that capture new markets, and we should think of funding those markets to build a more resilient ecosystem.
Wow, thank you very much. I think I love the aspect of inclusion, because like we all know, when we talk about the Nigerian ecosystem, we are invariably saying Lagos's ecosystem. But Nigeria has 36 states and the FCT. So I tell myself, imagine we have 15 states at the pace of Lagos. Then who knows Silicon Valley? We clearly will be number one. So, and that is why we also clamor that the Nigerian Startup Act that is basically being implemented now should be domesticated at all these states, so that at least we can have states come up to the level that Lagos is, for example. I would go straight to Mide. I know it's sometimes difficult when you're the last to speak, and then I'm expecting to hear just like this person has said. But after this person has said it, what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I mean, being one of the last can have that effect. But there's a few things some of my colleagues have said that I agree with. I think a few things I would just double down on is, one, Folarin said around getting the ecosystem to a point where you have founders invest in, younger entrepreneurs, not just financially, but mentorship, providing guidance, and even at the very early stage, inspirational and motivation. I think when your ecosystem gets to a point where in the early stage companies that are at pre-stage level, you have companies that have raised Series B, Series C investing, and then it means that what's going to happen is after those companies eventually exit, there's a pipeline of very strong companies that go through. The second thing I'm going to talk about is around investments, right? So, in Nigeria, I think maybe last year or maybe 18 months ago or prior to that, during COVID, there was this saying that there's a lot of investments coming to Nigeria, there's too much money coming in. And I was in a conversation yesterday, someone said, we now have Yahoo founders, right? And so what then happens is that you get to a point where there's this assumption that there's a lot of money coming in the system, but the one thing that we do at Endeavor is so Endeavor, for example, focuses on growth stage businesses, but more importantly, the reason why it's in Nigeria is because it's to showcase to Nigerian founders, or even non-founders, that there's still a journey. So if a GB or Flutterwave can see a checkout in another market who has raised ×3 or Flutterwave ×4, there's still a journey of where to go. And so it sort of continues to get to a point where, once our ecosystem gets to a point where Series B, Series C investments are not as hard, and they're a lot easier, then you get to know that it's not Series A, and then you then have to figure out what you do, whether your company dies or not. And I think the third thing I just want to talk about is really just around when our ecosystem starts to have macroeconomic issues, right? I mean, there's a lot going on in Nigeria today where, everyone seems like, I was listening to the radio today. They said that if you have not touched your fixed deposit, then you must be doing, you know, whatever you think you're doing, right? So, you know, once our ecosystem gets to a point where it's having macro and multiplier effects, where, you know, those doing agency banking are having ripple effects on like hiring hundreds of thousands of agents, which means they can now build their own individual wealth. You know, those doing B2B e-commerce are, you know, digitizing the mom and pop one-person businesses where it's allowing them to build their own personal wealth. Then that's sort of the journey that sort of I see Nigeria eventually gets into.
Oh, thank you very much. And I think I like the fact that you touched on funding, and that's taking me to the next set of questions. And the first question is going to Damilola. Now, it is everywhere. If you Google Nigeria ecosystem, the first few set of news you would see is that the funding is deeping. And we are like, what is going on? So my question to you is, what are the implications of this drought? Is it something that we should be really scared of? Or is it just that Q1, things might not go, and then we bounce, and then continue to see how the year is? So what are the implications of this drought, and what do you think we need to do going forward?
It's a very good question. There are positives and negative implications of the drought. And I'm trying to think whether to start with the negatives or positive. Good news or bad news first?
Start with the bad news and end with the good news.
So some of the negatives that we've seen, and people may already see this, is on one end you have a lot of scrutiny as well. A lot of people, I don't want to use the word hoarding, but you have people are being mindful of where they put in their investment. So money is not flowing as before, right? So if you're trying to raise money, it's a lot harder. Even for a good business, it's harder to raise, to close. And so if you're really just starting, all that money in 2021, 2022, it's, I wouldn't say dried up in that sense, but it's like people are more mindful of where they're putting in their money. You have commitments as well. So some investors are not keeping to their commitments. So you have startups who have projected based on a particular funding amount that don't get that money coming in. And it breaks down the entire business. So you have those as well. On the positive side, though, and you have a lot of other things that are happening. I could cascade this to layoffs and all that. And it's happening everywhere, Funding is drying up in multiple places, not just in Nigeria. On the flip side, though, it allows us to have conversations like this, and I was having a conversation with Folarin, about looking inwards, right? Local investment, what does that mean for us, right? We can't continue to rely on foreign capital all the time. Not that foreign capital isn't good, it's good, but we need to always balance it out because it's important. So that focus on local support and local investment is big. How we can the other question was around the droughts, how we stem it. I would say the one thing is being big on looking inwards. The other thing that I would say is governance and financial management. There's a lot of scrutiny. You have to be financially prudent. You have to be capital efficient with your business. There's a focus on the economics of your business, which is a good thing. So those are some of the positives, is that businesses now are not just saying, oh, I would grow customer base, I'm not caring about my margins or my revenue. There is a focus on that from every investor. Now, I work at Ventures Platform Fund, and when we're reviewing investments, these are the things that we look at. Are you solving hard problems? Are you solving markets, creating innovations like she spoke about, Chisom? It's very important. And so having those fundamentals, but also beyond that is accountability and governance, right? When you are, and I think it was the previous speaker, I can't remember her name now, that talked about what you do when you're a 0 to 2-year-old company is different from what you do from 2 to 5-year-old company. And you have to start building that resilience from when you're a younger stage company. Now, if we have some of those things in place, we would see quality pipelines, which would always attract money. Yeah, it might be slower for the money to come in, but a quality pipeline is a quality pipeline. Recently, we've closed deals even with the funding drought. When we see quality pipeline, money will follow it. And once you see a lot of that in the ecosystem, it helps with the resilience. When you then see older companies also having the right accountability and governance structures in place, it's also good for the ecosystem, right? And it attracts other investors to say, okay, you know, everyone is thinking about how to make their businesses accountable and governance is in place, so we can put more money in here. Local investors also can see that, okay, this whole startup bust thing is not as it is, it's getting more, you know, there's a lot of resilience and strength in it, so that's also important. So I think those are some of the things that we can do to help stem that drought.
Thank you. So before I go to the next speaker, are you optimistic that we're going to go back to like our 2022 figures in terms of funding? Are you optimistic that we'll get to like last year's figures in terms of funding, even if you're starting on a very low note? Folarin is saying yes.
No,
yeah, with the money
see,
in your pockets.
I think that there was some unrealistic elements in how that time was, right? So is it balanced now? I can't see. Is it lower than the balance? I think that's where even the fear is with some people. It's like, is this where the balance would be? Is it going to come up? But I don't know if we're going to go back to unrealistic valuations and people trying to close unrealistic valuations in like 1 week, you know? And most of that, you can't even bring in local capital. Because local capital, they want to do their due diligence as well. We do due diligence. But when people are like, oh, it's a 30 million valuation, where's the revenue, where's the product, and we want to close, it's like, are we helping ourselves as an ecosystem? When you go down the road and that multiple companies close, which is not a bad thing, but if multiple companies are closing because certain things were not in place, it's like, oh, did we not do our due diligence? Did these things not happen? So I don't think we want to go back to unrealistic places, but it's always good to have a balance. Where that balance is now,
we don't know. Okay, so let's see how the year goes and know where eventually the water is going to settle and the likes. And I also think, like you said, the investors are also now doing more of DDs to know, are we sure what is going on here? Now, Folarin, I know you're optimistic that we're going to get more funding, but working with an organization like Google that connects countries globally, how well do you think the Nigerian ecosystem is connecting globally to the ecosystem of other countries? And do you think if we do more of that, we have something to gain out of that collaboration?
Collaboration with other countries. I think we don't have a choice but to collaborate, right, because of the state of the ecosystem, right? So I think of it in terms of different things, and I think back to things I've worked on with Dami, for example, in the past. I think back to immersion programs. I think back to knowledge exchange. I think back to more recent conversations with the JETRO for Japan and the likes. And I think, so going back to the question of is Nigeria doing a good job at collaborating with other ecosystems? Short answer, yes. Longer answer is we don't have a choice but to do that, right? Otherwise, our startups will not scale at the points that we would like them to scale, right? So from a funding point of view, what collaboration looks like is our startups going outward, being immersed in other markets, and engaging with VCs, startups in other markets, bigger startups, bigger corporates in other markets as well, and exchanging knowledge, learning process and operations, and then bringing that back to here to grow their businesses. What collaboration also looks like is, I guess, out in. So other ecosystems also reaching out to understand emerging markets, understand how we operate, and see what the learnings that they can take from here are. I'll give a simple example, right? I laughed 2-3 weeks ago. I listened to a Vodafone pitch. They were talking about how the next big thing for them is Internet of Things, and it's now your car is going to be linked to your mobile number, and then there's going to be possibility for them to go into banking, and then it's like this and that, and insurance and all of that. And I laughed. I said, this is very interesting because we've had Momo, for example, in East Africa for almost a decade now, right? We've seen it come into the likes of West Africa and the rest, and this is where you are thinking now. I wonder where you got that learning from, right? It's from collaboration like that, for example. But what this collaboration also looks like is the other side of this collaboration is movements, right? So people moving from, again, people will move when they're comfortable. So the more we empower startups, the more comfortable their founders get and their staff get, and the more mobility we see. So what that collaboration also looks like is allowing them the opportunity to move outward, to go and settle in other areas and build or learn and then bring back the learnings later, or just live, right, and move on to other things, and allowing like easy flow of that knowledge and information.
I think I like the fact that you said we just can't do without collaborating. It is how, it is the extent, it is the skill that then determines how well we grow here. And while it is in-out, it can also be outside-in. So let me go to Chisom. One of the things that you mentioned when we were talking about a thriving ecosystem is talent. Everybody, it almost seems like the best political statement by a politician to say, I'm going to train 10,000 people in tech. We are going to, I'm beginning to sound like them. I'm not one of them. But my question is, the problem of tech talent in Nigeria, is it a quantity issue or a quality issue? Or is it even both?
So that's an interesting question. And just about your joke on politicians, we do have a program in partnership with Dev Careers where we're training 1,700 software developers, product managers, and product designers. So if anybody wants to register. That being said,
I thought you were going to say you were training 10,000 politicians. I was going to say that is very ingenious, but continue.
That being said, and to answer your question, it's a mix of both. So if we look at our professional careers from junior to mid to senior, at the junior level, we have both. We have quality because, I mean, what is really required of them? The fundamentals, and then they have somebody more senior to coach. And then quantity because, I mean, we just want 1,700, but as at last night, we had over 20,000 applications. So it shows you that there's quantity. But as you grow, for mid-level and especially senior level, organizations have, they've not been shy about talking about how difficult it is to recruit for those levels. So although at the early stage, there's quantity and there's quality, by the time you move up your career chain, there's quality and no quantity, so to speak. And it's because, I mean, you know, like Folarin was saying, we're collaborating, but what that also means for us is that our talents are in global demand, and our local startups cannot afford to pay what these, I mean, just look at the dollar-naira exchange rate. We can't even compete. So even the ones that we have, that we've managed to groom, they are jackbuying. And then, you know, junior level developers, the only way that they can become, well, I'm using developers, but I mean like technical, non-technical roles. The only way that they can grow is by doing. It's no longer by learning code or certain things. They have to see leadership. They have to see how to manage a team. They have to learn people management, learn soft skills. And they can only do that by doing the actual work. And so I think that, you know, it's a progression. If you're looking at the early stage, yes, quality and quantity. But if you're looking at the mid-level, if you're looking at the senior level, it becomes less of a quantity thing than a quality thing.
A quality thing, wow. Thank you very much. And I think I like the fact that while we say that we train people in Lagos, Nigeria, and then they just want to leave, or instead of working with local organizations, they prefer to work with foreign organizations because of the foreign exchange earnings. Now it's going to be a much bigger problem with Naira being floated, and pounds some days ago on the black market was selling at over 1,000 Naira. So the question is, 100 pounds there for just a junior guy, is he going to get that? Is he going to get the equivalent of that from a local company? Maybe no, and you clearly want to go for where the value is given in terms of money. So, but I think we did need to ensure that that pipeline is very patent, so that while some want to work internationally, we have a huge pipeline of guys that will be ready for the local market. Now to Mide, I know you get to answer the question last, not because Endeavor has stolen two of my predecessors as MDCUs, not that. We'll go to that later. But my question is, one of the features of a thriving and a ripe non-tech ecosystem is the preponderance of the term CSR, preponderance of the term giving back. In the non-tech ecosystem, industries, when they get to a point, they start having foundations, they start talking about giving back to their communities. Ecosystem in Nigeria is thriving, we are getting there. But are we there in terms of CSR? Is the ecosystem in that space where it is now trying to give back? or it is something we need to adopt at this point?
So I think there are stages to an ecosystem, right? We're not 100% there yet, but a lot of the founders in the Endeavor Network, for example, like reach out saying, they want to make out time to mentor younger founders. They may not be able to do it, so just help us create a platform, let us know the date and time, and we'll do it, right? So what you're starting to see is that there's a lot of, if things are at 3 stages, right? We're at the stage of paying it forward, but still at the early stage, right? Where it's founders that have genuine interest that are choosing to do it and are trying to make our time to do it. The ecosystem is not at a place where it automatically just happens, right? You still see, founders reaching out to people that they may know, who may know somebody to see if they can get in touch with somebody else. And I think what would eventually happen is that, platforms will just exist where, like in Silicon Valley, for example, you can go to a coffee shop at Starbucks and you can see someone that is there that is running a $5 billion business and say hi to him and he'll give you the time and day and have those conversations, right? Here it's a bit difficult, right? And so, platforms that provide sort of mentoring opportunities and support opportunities are very important. And so eventually what's going to happen is that our ecosystem, the more, founders find earlier stage businesses to invest in and to support, the more that's just going to happen organically. Second thing I actually just wanted to touch on was on the talent thing. I think, at the very early and mid-level stage, we definitely early stage we definitely have, right? Because there's that initial drive of students that leave school, they are seeing their friends do this, so they want to acquire the skills, they'll learn on their own, learn to code on their own, and then, get mentors and they're doing it. At the mid-level, because of those that did that years before, they're growing into those roles, and so they're organically learning on the job. So it's happening, but at the senior level, it's a lot tougher. And so what you see founders do that are at that growth stage is they start looking at other markets to see if they can bring people into Nigeria, to see if they can sort of coach and mentor. The problem though is that once the skills are now acquired by the mid-level guys, then they obviously start looking for opportunities outside, and so there's that jackpot syndrome. So to be honest, I actually don't know. There's been conversations around building like sort of senior level talent hubs in Nigeria or whatever, but no one wants to throw their cash into something that they're not sure is going to work. So
yeah, it's that pipeline of talent thing is an issue that we're going to keep meeting at every point. And interestingly, for the Lagos State government, let's say where we work, the issue of talent for us solves 2 problems. We have talents who then support the founders in building, but we also have these talents who then become founders. So for us, it not only solves the unemployment issue, but it also creates jobs because they then become founders. Now, at this point, because of time, we're going to have just one question and just one answer each from everyone. When the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed or was at the brink of collapse, everybody was scared. But then, the almighty government came in and said, "Thou shalt rise again," and the bank rose again. And thank God, people's money was saved. And the ecosystem in Nigeria, if there was one thing you wanted the government to do so that it will keep rising, what will it be? So I'll start with Mide because the questions always end, but I'll start with you. One thing that you think the government... Now, this question is selfishly for me because I'm taking notes down and they will take it to the office and say, they say I should tell you what they say I should tell you. But one thing that you think the government should do to maintain that growth spot in the ecosystem?
I thought I had the time to think about my answer.
Nah, you don't have the time again.
No, but I think, see, I don't like talking about government, so just be honest.
Don't worry, I won't report to you, just say.
There's no one watching. I think in the most vague natural term, create an enabling environment, right? Whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Okay.
You said we only have one sentence.
One sentence.
Yeah, that's my own sentence.
Okay. Chisom, I know when it comes to government, you should not be so shy to talk about us, so we know. So what do you think? One thing.
Quite shy, but just in addition to what Mide has said, Nigeria has a national digital economy strategy that is very comprehensive. I think we should start with implementing some of the things there. There are very low-hanging fruits there that we can start with. So that would be one. And then we can also talk about the Startup Act, and that would be a never-ending conversation. But we should also begin implementation, one. And then just like Lagos State, well done to Lagos State, they are actually doing some work trying to implement the act. Other states should also, do that as well. But if we can't do any of the above, my mantra is, if you can't really fix something or make it better, don't spoil it. And so let's not create policies or, implement things that now disrupt the ecosystem negatively. I don't want to talk about, what's the name of these guys? The Okada guys that...
Yeah, those guys, that issue happened a long while ago.
So let's not have that keep happening, because what will happen is we will have less local investments, we'll have no foreign direct investments, and the ecosystem will not grow.
Yeah, so interestingly, notice that she gave 2 recommendations because our organization has 2 names, UK Nigeria Tech Hub. So I allowed you to say 2. So, Folarin, what do you think?
Thanks.
Or they've said what you want to say.
No. I mean, let's let the startups breathe. Okay.
Maybe the government, they don't want you to speak.
Don't want me to go. It's okay. I'm going. Let the startups. Our startups are building in spite of government right now. So leave them. I know. Yes, there's questions on responsibility and ethicality and all that, but leave them to build. Let them build, and just don't interfere until you need to interfere. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, same thing that I advocate for with things like our visa regime and our foreign policy and the rest, is what this looks like is also, look, we have enablers already doing certain things, incubating, accelerating, bringing in investments and the rest, but we see the government needs to play a better role at bridging the gap between our local ecosystem, our Nigerian ecosystem, and foreign ecosystems. They can advocate for us when we're not in the room as well. And what that looks like is saying, look, let me use a simple example, right? I think back to the FIFA, when Qatar was lobbying for the World Cup to be in Qatar. And if you watch the documentary, you hear about how different countries requested for different things. Some said, okay, invest in maybe the fighter jets. Some said, okay, buy Neymar, and all sorts of things, right? And what we saw for African presidents and governments was requests for $1 million, tiny money, little money, right? What this looks like is at that level in those rooms, advocating for our ecosystems and I guess asking for investment to our ecosystems essentially and helping to bridge the gap.
I would just say, like everything my colleague said, enabling infrastructures and enabling policies. I wanted to just quickly touch on 2 things. One is talent. Very important, and there's a company called TalStack that is also doing great work there. And 2 is inclusiveness. Female founders in the room, we're looking to invest in you guys. Please show up. Wherever there's funding, please show up, don't be shy. More female founders in the ecosystem would also be good for the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, can I get a round of applause for my speaker?
Thank you. What an amazing panel. Thank you so much.